Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to do something a little special. We are a little over halfway through the decade, and with all of the major comic book movies of 2025 having now released, I figured that I would take a look back and give my takes on the best comic book movies of the decade so far. This list will have absolutely zero hot takes whatsoever, and I am giving the only correct list in existence. Any other list is invalid and wrong. Of course I'm kidding. There are plenty of takes that might be deemed a little controversial here, and while I wouldn't say that I necessarily have a normie taste, I'm not particularly hard to please, or maybe I just find things to appreciate in some places that others might not, I don't know. But real quick, before I continue on, be sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like, it's a great help. Also feel free to check out my Letterboxd, I'm very active over there. Comic book movies of the 2020s have been strangely inconsistent. The MCU has given us some of its absolute finest movies, but then also given us stuff like Quantumania and Love and Thunder, which, if I'm being honest, I do enjoy both of those movies to a certain extent. I don't think either of them are overtly bad films, but it is clear that they are not particularly liked by the general public, and they aren't among the best of the MCU. That said, I still stand by my stance that the MCU does not have an outright bad film. At its worst, it's something like The Incredible Hulk or Iron Man 2 or like Quantumania, which even these are passably entertaining. We've also witnessed the complete and unfortunate collapse of the DCEU, but also the birth of James Gunn's new DCU, which has a super bright future right now. Now for this list, I'm obviously excluding TV shows because, duh, they're not movies. But I do want to state that if I were just doing a best comic book anything adaptations of the decade, then stuff like WandaVision and The Penguin would be very high, as both of those series are among my favorite seasons of television that I've ever watched. And I want to give one honorable mention to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The main reason why I decided to not make this my number 10 was a simple question of, if I were given the option of choosing this movie or my number 10, I would probably pick my number 10 first. That is no insult to Shang-Chi because this movie slaps. The action is absolutely top-notch, I love the characters, Wen-Wu is one of the best MCU villains, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Destin Daniel Cretton is cooking up for Spider-Man Brand New Day. Oh boy. My number 10 is one I can already tell is a huge hot take, at least on the internet. My number 10 is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This is an incredibly underrated and overhated movie. You can't seem to go anywhere on the internet and mention this film and not be replied to with completely opposing comments from I love it, it was great, or that movie was stupid, it was horribly written, or whatever. I don't care. I love this film. I've loved it since the moment I saw it. But at the same time, I kind of hate this movie as much as I love it. I'll get into that a little bit later though. Overall, Multiverse of Madness is a wildly entertaining and fun ride of a movie. It moves at a breakneck pace that might be a little too fast at points, but it also never allows it to be boring. Sam Raimi's direction is distinct and so much fun to watch. Other than a few scattershot moments of awkward CGI, the effects in this film are brilliant, and it's combined with absolutely fantastic color grading, and it creates for one of the best looking, if not the best looking MCU film. People really seem to love to latch onto the very few seconds of the weird looking third eye at the end of the movie and think the whole movie has bad CGI. I hate to break it to you, but no, that's just wrong. It looks strange at the end, sure, but that's like 3 seconds of screen time. Doctor Strange himself gets a very satisfying arc of learning to let go of his desire to control everything. He finally lets go of the knife. And I feel like because of how prominent and how awesome Scarlet Witch is in this film, people decided to think that Strange himself doesn't get a solid arc and somehow doesn't have significantly more screen time than Wanda, because he does have more screen time than Wanda. But that also leads me to the best and worst part of this movie, which is obviously Wanda. Now, if you've seen any of my previous videos commenting on anything regarding the MCU, you would know that Wanda is my absolute favorite MCU character, and part of that is because of this movie. She's a great villain here. Was the arc from the end of WandaVision into this movie where she's already the villain a bit rushed? Sure, but it works, so I'm not gonna really complain about that. Elizabeth Olsen gives a powerful and entrancing performance, so much so that it is understandable when people say that she overshadows Strange in his own film. There's a reason why people are clamoring and begging Marvel to bring her back. Marvel, bring Wanda back. Her screen presence is unreal in this film, and her motivations are understandable, especially since she's being manipulated by the Darkhold, but she just wants her kids back. And the Darkhold obviously skews her mind on how that works. But still. So, why did I say that I hate this movie as much as I love it? Well, as much as I love Strange and Wanda in this film, as much as I love the simple but effective story, as much as I love the amazing Sam Raimi visuals, I have never gotten over the ending of this film. More specifically, I have never gotten over how the film decides to end, heavy quotations there, Wanda's story in this film. It is the most obvious and annoying fake death that I have ever seen. And I'm not the only one who is continuously frustrated by this decision to seemingly kill off Wanda, who had quickly become a fan favorite and her popularity has only increased since this movie. Marvel, bring Wanda back. The fact that they haven't fast-tracked her return or gotten a solo movie out for her is one of the most mind-numbingly stupid decisions Kevin Feige and Disney has ever made, in my opinion. I love Kevin Feige to death, I respect him, but dude, you need to realize that people really want Wanda back. She's like one of the main characters that people want to see again. Yes, I'm a Wanda stan, but I hate sitting by as I rot and not see anything specifically updated on what my favorite character in this franchise is, and it feels like Marvel is purposefully toying with us. Especially in Agatha All Along. The teases there were almost unbearable. It was ridiculous. That's a great show, but dude, come on. Instead of continuously talking about my depressing feelings on a movie, I'll point you to one of my Letterboxd reviews of this film, where I detail my frustrations in more detail. This is a thing that has given me real anxiety, and I'll just stop there for now. All I'll say is that despite recent back-to-back bangers in the MCU with Fantastic Four and Thunderbolts, if Wanda is not in Doomsday, I will legitimately lose all hope in this franchise, and there's a very good chance I will give up on what my favorite franchise is. And after spending a whole lifetime amped for every single release, that hurts. But all that said, Multiverse of Madness is a great movie, and I will defend that position to my grave. My number 9 is significantly less of a hot take than my number 10, and that is Deadpool and Wolverine. This is a movie that sadly suffers from the crowd of, actually, it's not that good, that inevitably pops up either from pretentious people as soon as it releases or bandwagoners a few months later. If you don't like the movie, that's perfectly fine, but the trend of revisionism on general consensus of a movie is very annoying. It seems like any of the films that have significant amounts of fan service have people just decide to ignore why people actually like the film in the first place and ignore every other aspect other than the few minutes of cameos. Like, no. People did not love Deadpool and Wolverine just because it has fan service. That's a ridiculous statement. Sure, is the fan service fun? Obviously. But I didn't see this movie 3 times opening weekend just for the Blade appearance, as cool as that is. I saw it 3 times on opening weekend because it was simply some of the most fun that I've ever had in a movie theater. And I've seen it multiple times at home for the same reason. It's just a super fun movie. People loved Deadpool and Wolverine, including myself, because it's hilarious, it's wildly entertaining, full of solid fight scenes, and has the right amount of heart for the characters within the story. The main reason this movie works so well is because you legitimately believe that Deadpool is desperate to save the people that he loves, while also being the lovable psycho mercenary who breaks the fourth wall. He might not be immediately setting out to save the world, but he is setting out to save his world, which ironically does evolve into him literally saving the world. And somehow, this movie miraculously does not disrespect the legacy of the masterpiece that is Logan. Deadpool does desecrate his grave and his corpse, but the impact of that movie is not ignored. The banter and interactions between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman are simply irresistible. Everything they say to each other is gold. The fight scenes are frantic, bloody, and well choreographed. The story, while simple, is effective and elicits the right emotions of 2 men who have a ton of regret and want to make up for some of the bad things that they've done. And of course, the fan service is also fun. It's not the end-all be-all of the movie, but it does create for a great first-time viewing experience and watching other people react to it. Chris Evans, Johnny Storm popping up, Gambit, Elektra, and obviously Blade. It's a lot of fun to see them get their moments to finally shine, but it admittedly does irritate me when people say, "But it's just fan service." Well, first of all, I'm a fan. Sometimes I want to be serviced, but I would not state that the fan service stuff as the main reasons why I love this movie. I love this movie because it's just a fun, entertaining movie that happens to have some cool fan service stuff. It was my second favorite movie of 2024 for a reason. It isn't as vivid or visually epic like Multiverse of Madness is, but I also don't feel like I'm going to keel over from anxiety after watching it, so that's why I have it above Doctor Strange 2. My number 8 is the first of quite a few James Gunn movies that will appear in this list. The Suicide Squad is just so good. James Gunn is an expert at taking these ridiculous and obscure comic book characters and turning them into characters that the audience becomes attached to and really comes to care about. Who would have thought that we'd fall in love with characters like Ratcatcher 2, Bloodsport, Polka Dot Man, or King Shark, or even Peacemaker? All of the primary characters in this movie really make it my favorite film from the old DCEU. Sure, I like stuff like Man of Steel and Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, but this film is far more well-rounded in my opinion and hits my specific tastes just a lot better than those films do. This movie is also delightfully and completely ridiculous in the best possible way. There's a literal shark man, a guy who shoots polka dots, a guy that wears a shiny mirror hat and murders people because he thinks it'll bring peace, and a giant starfish monster. It's crass, it's brutally violent, it constantly has ridiculous, silly humor, yet it never feels like it loses its heart. There's so much character to this movie, both in the literal sense with the characters, but also from a filmmaking standpoint. There are so many moments that are directly related to the character moments and their growth that help us feel more connected to them, but there are also a ton of really subtle moments with these characters that are easily missed. For example, there's a quick moment with King Shark where he is simply looking out to a group of people, and yet we can still feel the loneliness that he has because he has no real friends or connections. It's also a compliment to the CGI team that they made a freaking Shark Man emote so subtly. The plot of the film is kept very smartly, very simple, where Task Force X needs to accomplish a mission, but that simple plot allows for the greater focus on these complicated character interactions. Idris Elba's Bloodsport is really the central character and he works very well. Polka Dot Man, as silly as the character is a deeply haunted and tragic figure. Peacemaker gets a lot of standout moments, particularly in killing Rick Flag, which is then explored in his own show, which is also a fantastic show. Harley Quinn is once again brilliantly portrayed by Margot Robbie. The original Suicide Squad movie is awful, and Birds of Prey was just fine, at least in my opinion, but Margot Robbie has always been consistently perfect as Harley, and her escape fight sequence is absolutely brilliant. And then Ratcatcher 2 is arguably the heart of the film, and even as something as ridiculous as a kaiju starfish monster is, Star the Conqueror is given genuine empathy where he's just lashing out at what humanity has been doing to him for years. I love this movie. I rewatched it earlier this year and it's just so much fun. It's full of heart and it also delivers on the crazy, brutal violence and crass humor. The action is great. The pacing is also excellent. James Gunn is arguably the best comic book director, maybe ever. Would you look at that? It's another James Gunn movie. My number 7 is Superman. Superman does exactly what it was set out to do and what it needed to do, and it succeeds in spades. This film needed to start a brand new DC cinematic universe, it needed to be liked by audiences and critics, it needed to at least do some decent box office, and it did all of those things with flying colors. It did well beyond its break-even point, and was loved by most of the audience. This is a movie that absolutely nails the tone and characterization of Superman himself. I'm not even gonna hesitate. This is easily the best Superman movie in my opinion, and David Cornsweet's rendition of Supes is my favorite version of this character. Look, I really like Man of Steel, but it doesn't exactly elicit the feeling of hope you'd necessarily want from Superman, but this movie makes me actively want to be a better person, and you can't say that about many films. This version of Superman is a relatable, complex, and aspirational person. I say person and not figure because that is how he is characterized and it's brilliant. He's not perfect, and that's exactly why I love him. Sure, he has all this physical power, but it's him as a person that makes me love Clark. Some morons have whined that Superman gets beat up in this movie, to which I say, boo-hoo! Superman gets beat by a clone of himself, and he gets beat by kryptonite, like his classic weakness. Come on, people. None of his losses are just because of reasons like some people have claimed. They don't depower him at all. gun just pits Superman against foes that are as powerful as he is. Like, at one point in this movie, he literally uses his frost breath to get away from a black hole. That is arguably the most powerful thing we have ever seen Superman do on screen, other than maybe lift the island from Superman Returns. It is so bizarre to me that people will complain about this Superman being not a perfect person, but be extremely hypocritical in how they look at female characters. If a woman is arrogant, they're unlikable. If they're capable, they're overpowered and a Mary Sue. It's a lot of hypocrisy there. And I guarantee when Supergirl comes out next year, these same cretins will come out of the woodwork and have the opposite issue with Kara than they did with Clark in this movie and complain that she's somehow too powerful. Whatever. By the way, I cannot wait for Supergirl next year. That's one of my most anticipated movies of 2026. This movie also has the best on-screen chemistry between Lois and Clark. Rachel Brosnahan was absolutely perfect as Lois Lane. Nicholas Hoult was incredible as a deliciously hateable Lex Luthor. It's a film filled with a ton of solid action sequences, particularly the final battle when the city is being torn apart by Lex's Rift and Superman fights Ultraman. Heck, I'd argue that Superman vs. Ultraman in this film is a better fight scene than any of the Superman fights in BVS or the Snyder Cut. Not including the Batman warehouse fight because, well, obviously that's a Batman fight scene and it doesn't involve Superman. Plus there's an abundance of fun side characters that help make the world feel lived in, like Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner. And it manages to have all of these fun side characters without ever losing the focus on the primary trio of Clark, Lois, and Lex. To put it simply, this is a movie that I walked out of all 3 times at the theater that I saw this, just feeling happy and wanting to be a better person, and I cannot say that about most movies. I would probably also say that this movie has a little bit too much going on at certain points and could have used an extra 10 to 15 minutes, but it doesn't take away from how much fun and how impactful this movie is, and that is why it is my number 7 on this list. I am going to cheat for my number 6 and my number 5 picks, because I just cannot decide as of this moment whether I like Thunderbolts or the Fantastic Four First Steps more. For the sake of an honest list, I will start with Thunderbolts in 6th place. I knew that this movie would be special from the moment I saw the first trailer. It had a distinct visual style with a seemingly clear vision on the story and no behind-the-scenes drama whatsoever. You notice how pretty much any time an MCU film as of late has no behind-the-scenes drama or big rumors of reshoots or whatever, it almost always turns out great, like Loki Season 2 and Agatha All Along and Deadpool and Wolverine and this movie and Fantastic Four. It's just kind of an interesting pattern I've noticed. And that's not saying that behind-the-scenes drama automatically is a death sentence for the quality not being great for an MCU project. Daredevil Born Again pretty infamously had a lot of reshoots, and that turned out really great in my opinion. Thunderbolts is the cinematic equivalent of therapy. I haven't related this close to a character's internal struggles in a comic book movie maybe ever. Thunderbolts is a movie about exploring mental health and outcasts who feel like they don't belong anywhere. The ultimate message of this film is just so perfect in my eyes. I interpret it as this: depression and other mental illnesses, whether it be anxiety or even just loneliness, while not easily curable, can be mended by connecting with others and finding meaning in our close relationships. I love that this movie doesn't end with everyone overcoming depression, woohoo, I'm no longer depressed, kind of ending of a movie, but more so that the characters now have better ways of dealing with their struggles. Because depression and anxiety and other things that are similar to it are not just simple, follow this one method down the road and you'll end up being better. It's a different struggle for everybody, and it manifests itself differently in everybody. It can only really be helped by finding the right tools to deal with it. And this movie, I feel like, really connects with that meaning really well, and that's why I connect with the characters so much. I absolutely love Yelena as a character. I might even say that I like Yelena more than Natasha already. That very well could be that I just relate a bit closer to Yelena's struggle in this movie than I ever did with Natasha. Don't get me wrong, I love Natasha. And it also helps that while Thunderbolts deals with this really heavy subject matter, it's an incredibly entertaining and fun movie. The dialogue is memorable and tightly written. Every character interaction feels natural. The action is very solid, particularly the first fight in the bunker and the sequence when Sentry is first unveiled. Ghost is really the only character that I would have liked to see a bit more with, but I still enjoy her character in the movie. I love Red Guardian here. He's legitimately hilarious, but carries a lot of the heart of the film. John Walker is also an excellent character, and I love where he ends up. But Sentry is the ultimate standout in this film, aside from Yelena. I adore everything they did with his character, and I love how the team ultimately defeats the Void. Bob nearly gives into his despair and darkness, but because of him connecting with Yelena, John, and the rest of the team, they bring him back from that darkness in what is one of the most emotionally resonant and powerful moments in a comic book movie, maybe ever. Thunderbolts exceeded all of my expectations. It has a very tightly written script, and it gives these characters a lot of time to shine, and I cannot wait to see more of them. As I said earlier, I sort of have Fantastic Four and Thunderbolts tied, so you could probably ignore the 5 displayed on the screen, but for the sake of the video, I'll keep it as 5. The Fantastic Four First Steps 100% lived up to my high expectations. This is, surprisingly enough, now the MCU movie that I've seen the most in theaters at 4. I mean, come on, I had to see Fantastic Four 4 times. Just like how Yelena and Bob were immediately skyrocketed to S tier characters for me, Reed Richards and Susan Storm in this movie are in a similar boat here. Don't get me wrong, I love Ben and Johnny in this movie, but Reed and Susan are just on another level for me. I love them so much. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The Fantastic Four First Steps is exactly what the MCU needed. A unique, vibrant world with characters that we enjoy being with, as well as a story that is filled with tension and legitimate dread. Within the first 5 minutes, I already fell in love with all of the Fantastic Four. That opening montage does an incredible job at setting up nearly every aspect of this world within the MCU, and for setting up basically every little element that'll be paid off within the plot. This is also a film with a breakneck pace, but at the same time, it never feels like it's going too fast. Would I have liked to have seen a little bit more, maybe 10-15 minutes? Sure, but unlike Superman, where I think that movie would have benefited a lot from an extra 10 to 15 minutes, I don't think this movie needed it. It would have been cool to have, but I don't know if it would necessarily benefit all that much. The movie very smartly pretty much only focuses on around 6 characters, with the Fantastic Four themselves, Silver Surfer, and Galactus. And because of this tight focus, it allows for the characters to breathe, and we really get to see their dynamic as a family, and it feels really genuine. And I also love how the film doesn't take a huge emphasis on the spectacle or action. Of course, it has some of that stuff, and when the big action happens, it's awesome. But, rightfully so, it spends its time on the characters and the world itself. Pedro Pascal is incredible as Reed Richards. I think he does such a good job in this movie. Vanessa Kirby is a powerhouse as Invisible Woman. Joseph Quinn brings some necessary humor to the movie with Johnny, but also expresses a great deal of competence. And Eben Moss-Backrack as the Thing is one of the main hearts of the film. Other than some weird CGI baby moments, this is a gorgeous looking film, not only from a cinematography and visual effects standpoint, but also a set design and world building perspective. The retrofuturism works so well to make the world feel authentic and completely different from anything else in the MCU, and the film also nails Galactus with his scale and the voice and the dread that he induces throughout the entire film, as well as him not being directly a villain and more of a force of nature that is just looking to survive. And I also adore Silver Surfer in this film. She's a standout in a film that is mostly standout characters. I mean, the whole space sequence at the beginning of the second act or so is one of the best MCU sequences that they've ever produced, and part of that is because the Silver Surfer literally surfs on the accretion disk of a black hole. Just the whole sequence from the moment they lift off into space to the moment when they get back and Reed announces that they didn't defeat Galactus, it's like 20 minutes of the best science fiction movie I've seen in a long time, let alone MCU. That whole sequence is just masterful. The introduction of Galactus is huge, and the black hole sequence is exciting, intense, and jaw-dropping to look at. Matt Shakman absolutely cooked with that sequence. I mean, he did with the rest of the movie, but that specific sequence is just incredible. And as I've stated before, the dread and tension built up towards Galactus finally arriving to Earth is legitimately intense. The final fight is a lot of fun while it never nerfs Galactus's power, while also getting the team to showcase their powers, with Sue obviously showcasing some immense power, and one of the coolest moments of the movie where she lets her mom instincts take over. I cannot wait to see these characters again. I can't wait for the Blu-ray to come out. And I should also mention that Michael Giacchino's score is mesmerizing. One of the best scores of the year and one of the best scores in the entire MCU. If Marvel can keep the streak they've been doing with this and Thunderbolts, they're gonna make some good stuff, that's all I'll say. As long as Wanda's in Doomsday. My number 4 might spark some questions as to why it's not higher, but don't get me wrong, I think all of the films from here on are, generally masterpieces. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is just a jaw-dropping achievement in animation and superhero storytelling. Just from a visual standpoint, Across the Spider-Verse is unbelievable. Quite literally, every frame of this film is breathtaking to look at. The use of different styles for each primary character, whether it be different frame rates or the different colors, it's gorgeous. It's fast and kinetic animation, but it's never too overbearing, and it always draws your attention to the right spots, while also having a lot of details on the side for very observant viewers to look for. And it also helps that the storytelling is also excellent in this film. This movie takes more time to flesh out its characters than the first film does, and for an animated film, it's a very long one with about 2 hours and 20 minutes for the runtime, and it uses every second of that runtime brilliantly. The Spot is a very solid villain that initially starts off as the villain of the week sort of gag character, but really develops into something very menacing, and I'm excited to see where they go in the next film. And I adore Miles and Gwen as the two protagonists of this film. I should also mention that Daniel Pemberton's score is absolutely phenomenal. The only complaint I really have about this movie is that it ends on a huge cliffhanger and Beyond the Spider-Verse has yet to release. Remember when that movie was supposed to release in March of 2024? Yeah. The wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse has been very long, to say the least. And as far as Spider-Man stories are concerned, it doesn't get that much better. The handling of personal responsibility while balancing the superhero life and saving the people that you care about is explored very well with both Gwen and Miles' storylines. Gwen struggles with the grief of losing her best friend, running away from her father, and the desire to connect with the friends that she previously made in the last movie, while also balancing the new responsibilities she's been given by the Spider Society. And then Miles is struggling with the usual Spider-Man stuff, but the introduction of canon events causes a very large crisis within him and all of the Spider-Men when Miles tries to prevent said canon event while it seems inevitable, and the other Spider-Men want the timelines to remain stable, so it's kind of a very big moral predicament. And then the other characters in the film are great. Miles' parents are great. The relationship between Gwen and her father is very well done. I love the animation in the scenes in her universe. Miguel O'Hara is a very well done sort of side antagonist, main antagonist of the second half of the movie. And obviously we love seeing Jake Johnson's Spider-Man come back from the first film with his new daughter. And then the movie ends on a very large cliffhanger where Miles is stuck in a universe where he becomes a villain. Can Beyond the Spider-Verse just release now? I need to see how this ends. We seriously might have Wanda back on our big screens, well, at least hopefully, before Beyond the Spider-Verse even comes out. My number 3 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. When I said that the MCU is still making some movies that are among the best that they've ever done, I wasn't kidding. Between this movie, Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts, and the second movie on this list, I just cannot take anyone seriously who says that the MCU is bad now. I believe Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is James Gunn's magnum opus. I think it is his best movie, it is among the best of the MCU, and it masterfully concludes the story arc of the Guardians in a fun, exciting, and in a brutally heartbreaking story. This movie recontextualizes Rocket to be the lead character of this franchise in one of the most heart-wrenching backstories that I've ever seen in any comic book adaptation. Heck, one of the most heart-wrenching backstories I've ever seen in any movie. This is probably the most I've ever cried in a movie theater, like full-on sobbing at multiple points in the movie. This movie really hurts me on an emotional level, but I love it anyway. Every character is given standout moments and arcs. It is a breathtakingly made movie with great visuals and a breakneck fast pace that never lets it feel too fast to where it overshadows the characters in the story, but it really has a strong forward momentum. The villain is truly despicable with the High Evolutionary, and the film has an incredibly satisfying ending. Call me morbid, but before going into this movie, I was kind of hoping a primary character would die for the sake of stakes and emotion, but by the end, I was thankful that I was wrong because I don't know if I could have emotionally handled any of the main Guardians dying. This movie handles its stakes very well. It is incredibly high stakes and personal stakes. And I mean, it really just starts with the team racing to save Rocket's life, and it eventually evolves into stopping the High Evolutionary from continuing his awful experiments. The ending, when the Dog Days Are Over song plays, it leaves my heart swelling out of pure joy and sobbing because of the bittersweet nature of the Guardians going their separate ways. The action is great and exciting, particularly the hallway fight at the end. That's an all-timer MCU fight scene. Sadly, I can't necessarily watch this movie too often because it is emotionally exhausting for me to watch. Like, I will literally get a headache because I'm tearing up so much. But I adore it with all of my heart, especially because the Guardians of the Galaxy are just characters that mean so much to me personally. My second favorite comic book movie of the decade so far would not have been a hot take about 2 years ago, but I guess it might be now. Spider-Man No Way Home remains my favorite Spider-Man movie, and I will stick to that claim. I adore this movie. You know, when I was talking about the revisionism surrounding Deadpool and Wolverine simply because it has fan service? Well, times that by about 50 for this movie's modern reception. What the heck happened, man? I thought we all agreed this movie was amazing. Yes, the movie has nostalgia and fan service, but in no way does it make this movie worse. This is one of the best Spider-Man stories ever, in my opinion. It really represents the consequences of Spider-Man's actions and the hard choices that Spider-Man/Peter Parker has to face. Peter makes a seemingly selfish decision to try and erase the memory of everyone knowing that he is Spider-Man, and I really love how Doctor Strange responds to this. I love that he's just immediately willing to help him because he got to know him in Infinity War and Endgame, and he feels sorry for the kid and the situation that Peter and his friends are in, because the public is harassing them and making their lives so much worse. And then naturally both Peter and Strange mess up the spell, but they don't really think too much about that because it doesn't initially seem like anything is wrong. But then Strange kicks him out because Peter was being very myopic about not getting into MIT, in a rather amusing scene, I think. And then of course this is when the alternate universe villains start appearing because of the new rip in reality. While it is awesome that Alfred Molina, Jamie Foxx, and Willem Dafoe come back to their old roles, it is more of what they represent in the story that I appreciate. It's about Peter trying to balance every aspect of his life and trying to get everything that he wants, but he obviously can't do that without having to sacrifice something else. And it also represents the inherent goodness of Peter that he wants to help these people that have tried to kill him. Peter could have easily rounded up these loose villains and sent them home to die, but because of his inherent good nature, he decides to help these people because he sees it as the right thing to do, and of course this has consequences. I maintain my position that Tom Holland is the best live-action Spider-Man. I'm sorry, Tobey and Andrew fans, I love them too, but Tom represents everything you want out of Spider-Man in this movie. His performance is genuinely powerful, particularly in the second half of the film. The sorrow and rage that builds up in him after Green Goblin kills Aunt May is incredibly authentic. Tobey and Andrew being in this movie is a dream come true, and every time I watch it, I can't help but think, dang, they really pulled this off. They finally got their proper send-offs as well, and while I think it would be cool to see them again, my guess is Secret Wars. I would also like this to be their last time as Spider-Man. I just think it's too perfect of an ending for them. The chemistry between the three Spider-Man is also excellent, but one thing that I really appreciate is that while the movie does get to have the fun with the three of them together, the first time that Tom's Spider-Man meets the other two, it's not a fun scene. It's one of the heaviest and most emotionally devastating scenes in the movie on the school rooftop. I often see people say this is just a movie that is just filled with nostalgia and no substance, and to that I say, did we watch the same movie? Just that one scene alone on the school rooftop has so much depth and emotional nuance to it. In fact, there's a ton of narrative and emotional depth to this movie, and that is why it is my favorite Spider-Man movie, not just because it has cool stuff that happens in it. And I think the ending is also perfect, where Peter finally realizes that he can't balance everything in the way that he wants to, and he has to sacrifice his personal identity as Peter Parker to save the ones that he loves. I adore this movie. It is one of the most rewatchable and emotionally heart-wrenching MCU films for me. I cannot wait to see what Destin Daniel Cretton is cooking up for Brand New Day. I mean, come on, Jon Bernthal's Punisher is making his big screen debut. How awesome is that? This all leads to my absolute favorite comic book movie of the decade so far, and that film is The Batman. The Batman is a movie that feels like it was specifically made for me. It is a combination of all of my favorite kinds of things in movies and is executed to an absolute perfect degree by Matt Reeves. The Batman is a film dripping with style and atmosphere without sacrificing any element of the storytelling. This is an adaptation of Batman that truly understands the character. I adore Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, and I'd probably still say that I prefer The Dark Knight over The Batman, but only really Batman Begins understood and explores that Batman himself is the real person, and Bruce Wayne is the mask. And even then, it really doesn't explore that concept all that much, but is an integral part of Batman as a character. This movie, on the other hand, is almost entirely dedicated to that aspect of Batman. So much so that Bruce barely even goes out with the false personality of Bruce Wayne. And when he does, he hasn't really figured out his public persona yet, so he feels incredibly uncomfortable. But when he's in the Batsuit, he is comfortable and he is his true self. The Batman is also a film with a very simple yet incredibly powerful arc for Batman. He begins the film thinking he has to go out as Batman, and he has to go about fighting crime in a specific way to save the city. But his approach has only radicalized the wrong kind of people and has sparked fear in the eyes of normal citizens. By the end, when he's actually going out of his way to save and help people, he finally realizes his big mistake and realizes that he needs to be a symbol that, while it strikes fear in the hearts of criminals, needs to inspire the normal person by aiding people, rather than just going out to beat up criminals. Ideally, this leads to Batman Part 2, where he uses the Bruce Wayne persona for philanthropy and aiding the normal person with generous monetary donations, but that movie is a long time from now, unfortunately. And this is just the character of Batman. I haven't even started on Robert Pattinson's actual performance, or the noir detective style of the story, or the jaw-dropping cinematography. This might be the best looking comic book movie ever made. Greg Fraser is quickly becoming one of the best cinematographers in the business. I love a good dark crime thriller in the vein of movies like Seven, Prisoners, or Zodiac, and this film takes plenty of inspiration from those films, especially with the way that Batman and James Gordon try and figure out Riddler's plot. Speaking of which, Paul Dano's Riddler is just a great villain, along with a now iconic rendition of the Penguin from Colin Farrell. The action and the fight scenes are hard-hitting without feeling too over the top, and the suspense throughout the entire 3-hour runtime never lets up. The Batman is a masterful comic book film that has so many moving pieces and elements of world building to it that it only adds to the incredible portrayal of the character from Robert Pattinson. I'm not yet willing to say that Pattinson is my favorite live-action Batman just yet, just because he's only done one movie, but it is entirely possible that after Part 2 he becomes my favorite. We still have to wait 2 years for Part 2, sadly. Hell, we'll probably get Wanda back on our screens before this Batman returns. Marvel, please, I swear, she's not in Doomsday. I absolutely adore what Matt Reeves pulled off here, and it is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time, let alone my favorite of the decade. That will do it for my top 10 comic book movies of the decade so far. This has been easily my longest scripted video that I've made as of now, so I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to comment what your favorites of the decade are so far. There's plenty to choose from. Remember to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. Remember to check out my Letterboxd. Stay tuned for some content from me in the future. Okay, bye.
If it is to be said, so it is.